Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we're going from 1000 to 2000 elo in chess.com rapid games, where I'll be explaining my thought process as best as I possibly can for your education and entertainment. And today we face 1d4, and I like to play c6 for a multitude of reasons, one of them being that we invite my opponent to transpose back into a Caro Kann, which he does, so fantastic. Let's go d5. You guys know that I love the Caro Kann, and if this is your first time on the channel, now you know. My opponent goes for the advanced variation. I'm going to go c5, immediately challenging the white d4 pawn, because if this d4 pawn falls, likely the e5 pawn will fall, because let's say this d pawn disappears, the e5 pawn is clearly overextended, right? So we're going to apply further pressure with knight to c6. White can take, but we will most likely win the pawn back. Okay, use f4. f4 is a move. f4 is a move. Now, can I remember what to do against this? I think we're supposed to start with taking, so that the c-pawn takes. And we will try to apply lots of pressure to this pawn, because by removing the c-pawn from the scenario, this pawn cannot be defended by another pawn, because there's now no c-pawn, and the e-pawn is too far advanced. I feel like bishop to f5 is the best move, but I think we can start with knight to h6, which can own... Knight h6, the knight doesn't normally go to h6, right? Normally, in these structures, you play e6, knight e7, and then bring the knight over to the king's side. However, here, because the move f4 is on the board, white doesn't have the option to take our knight, meaning we can bring our knight out like this. I'm going to go bishop to g4, applying pressure to this knight. I wanted to start with knight to h6 so that I wait to see if my opponent wants to bring this knight out. And I prefer my bishop on the g4 square pinning the knight than being on the f5 square staring into nothingness. Both are fine, that's just my personal preference. My opponent goes knight to c3, applying pressure to our d-pawn, so we'll just play e6 and defend the pawn. Now our bishop is outside the pawn chain. a3, okay, interesting. Very interesting. Of course, I think we can take. Because if queen takes, we just win the d4 pawn. We just up a pawn. We threaten the queen, we threaten knight c2 check, and we defend bishop to b5 check. And if we take in pawn takes, then queen to h4 check. Because we now have e6 on the board, our queen can come to h4 with check. And the king will have to move. And that should be very good. That should be very, very good. So, yeah, I don't know what my opponent was doing there. I think bishop to e3 was probably a better move, just defending d4. But yeah, queen h4 looks very, very good. And I mean, hey, I'm not saying this position's winning, but it certainly looks good, doesn't it? It certainly looks good. Okay, well, I suppose one of the downsides of this position is because a3 is on the board, my bishop doesn't have anywhere great to develop. It can't come out to b4. But in the Caro, it's pretty typical for the bishop just to go to e7. And because we have so many pawns on light squares, the bishop is just a good defensive piece, monitoring the dark squares. So it's really not that big a deal. I think knight to f5 is quite a good move. Not only because we threaten to win the d4 pawn with check, but also I think we're threatening knight to g3. Because we fork the king and the rook, and if take, then we take. And that looks pretty damn good to me. Now, I will check to see if we have anything better, but I think that should be pretty much winning. I mean, we win in exchange by force. Yeah, I don't see a reason not to do this. This bishop can't move anywhere with some kind of check and discovered attack on my queen, so yeah, take. My queen always has an escape route. She can just come back to h2 with check anyway, and either pick this pawn up or force the bishop back to f2 to defend. And then, I mean, we just go ahead and develop. And we're up in exchange. We have still good pressure on the d-pawn. This pressure isn't going anywhere. My opponent could try and bring a knight to d6 or something. But, I mean, I don't really care. Worst case scenario, I could play a6 preemptively to stop the knight from coming in. And maybe the knight can try and come to b6, but that doesn't really matter that much. Okay. Queen comes to a4, trying to maybe set up some kind of discoveries. Now, white doesn't actually have any discoveries because the bishop has 2 squares to move to, and it hangs on both of those squares. I also can't really play a6 right now because the knight can still come to b5, and I can't take because my rook will hang. So I'm leaning more towards the move bishop to e7. I could play queen to h2 check. Oh, wait. Oh, no, I don't have this. The queen still defends this square. So the queen is actually pretty well placed on a4. I think it's best for me just to get castled. I think that's the best thing to do. I'm just checking there's no kind of tactic. Yeah, I mean, that's not all that threatening. I don't actually see what that does. I think I can just castle. And if you come into d6, I mean, I could snap it. If you come to c7, I'll just move my rook out the way. That's not a problem. Okay, rook to c1. Again, we can deliver this check. Not sure exactly what it does, though. A6 looks pretty good. Just attacking the knight, asking it what it's doing. I like that. If the knight comes to d6, I think we just snap the knight off the board and go rook to d8, and we're probably just going to win the pawn. And again, this bishop still can't move to a useful square with a useful discovery. Yes, this rook is now protected by the bishop, but where's this bishop going to go? The king is blocking its movement out this direction. And if he does move the king to try and cause some kind of discovery, then I'll just move my queen. So, okay, the knight goes back. Fantastic. Fantastic. The knight now is doing very little. I could play b5. Attacking the queen. Sure, my knight hangs for the time being, but my opponent first has to address the threat. If take, maybe that's playable. Maybe. b5, knight takes, pawn takes, queen takes. You don't have time to take my knight because your queen's hanging. Knight to a5 looks pretty strong. b3. Feels unnecessary to get involved in that, to be fair. Feels unnecessary. I'm going to go queen h2 check because I want my opponent to go bishop to f2. There we go. There we go. And now I think b5 is quite strong. Reason being is if this queen stops protecting d4, then I can take it because the bishop is now pinned. Therefore, moves like knight b5 don't work. Because if knight b5 in this situation, if take, I just have knight takes d4 with a fork. So my opponent retreats the queen. I do have to be aware of the fact this knight can take on b5 or d5 with a discovered attack on my knight, which I don't want to allow, of course. So I think knight to a5 coming into c4 looks pretty logical. If b3, I can just snap this and go maybe b4, or maybe bishop back to b4. I could also put a rook on c8 and just challenge the c file, which also looks viable. Of course, the queen is protecting this pawn, so I can't take it right now. Yeah, I mean, it's a good position. My bishop struggles to get into the game a little bit, which is one of the downsides of this position. I have to be aware of the possibility of f5 at some point, trying to break through my position. I do have to be aware of that. I don't want to play g6 for no reason, though. I think for the time being, knight to a5 looks pretty good. And I'll probably bring one of my rooks, or maybe both, to the c file to challenge my opponent's rook at some point. Not really sure why my opponent's playing so quickly, considering he's not gotten himself into a good position. Okay, he does go f5. If I take, then knight takes. That looks uncomfortable. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, hopefully you're learning a lot. Please drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I would really, really appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, knight c4 looks like a good move. If take, then I just take and I open up the rook. So that's actually quite good. If f6, my bishop just opens up, which is also quite good. So I don't think I'm too fussed. If g6, then f6, that's, not so great. My bishop doesn't really have a future. I could maybe reroute the bishop to b6 at some point. I think for the time being, knight c4 is a perfectly legitimate move. And if b3, I think I just go ahead and take on a3. And if take, Queen takes, b takes, or maybe even, no, probably b takes. And what's the material count there? It's 2 rooks for 3 minor pieces, but I have the extra pawns and also control of the b file. Maybe not necessary. I mean, if b3, I suppose my knight could just take. So I don't have to go into all those complications if I don't want to. I could also just go knight b6 and defend my d-pawn. And also apply pressure to a3. Okay, my opponent goes queen c2. Interesting choice. I suppose now the pressure has been taken off of d4. Okay. Well, rook c8 looks very natural. I don't actually see what this move does. I mean, I assume you're trying to support the f5 pawn, but you... doesn't really do anything, does it? There's a very cool idea of taking on e5 and trying to go bishop c5 to apply pressure, but that seems like way too much right now. Let's just go rook ac8. It can't be a bad idea to put my rook on this file, right? It can't be a bad idea. My queen's doing a really good job of occupying quite a few of the white pieces, really. By applying pressure to the bishop and the king, this bishop also can't really move, and this bishop can't really move. And it's difficult for white to actually attack my queen. And I can always just retreat the queen if I need to anyway. It's quite a thorn in white's side. I maybe have to be careful of it getting trapped at some point, but I very highly doubt that. Very highly doubt it. I assume my opponent actually just went queen c2 to defend b2. That's probably the reasoning behind it, which does make sense. However, it also puts the queen on the c file, which is, you know, a bit of a lot of a commitment. It's a big commitment. Okay. Well, I mean, this is a very nice position. I can even consider moves like knight e5, de5, and d4. Whoa. g5? Sorry, g4? Can't I go bishop g5 now? That's just game over, isn't it? Because I didn't go for it previously. Because if I'd have gone bishop g5 in like this position, then my opponent just has f4. Supported by this. But now, yeah, I have access to like the e3 square, which looks really strong. Bishop e3 looks really good. Looks really good. Yeah, this is a fantastic position. I could even go bishop to h4 if I want. Knight d1. Knight e3, what a move. Attacking the queen and the knight. Attacked by 3 different things, but the queen is hanging. And I'm attacking the knight, which is defending the bishop. That looks really strong, actually. I think I like that. And it's useful to force the rook away from the c file, because it means that my opponent can't like take on c8 with back rank ideas. Okay, well here we just trade the queens, don't we? And we win. Although actually knight e3 looks really good. Knight e3 looks very strong. It can't be taken because of the pin anyway, and we're attacking the queen and opening up the rook. If queen to d2, which looks like the only move. Take. King takes. I mean, we could just go ahead and take on f2 and trade everything and just be up a clean exchange, which is definitely an option. We could also take on b2, and if queen takes, rook c3, and if queen takes, then queen f2, king d1, queen f1. Oh, we don't end up winning the rook, but it's still winning. Although, again, it seems unnecessarily complicated. You also can't take the bishop because your queen hangs, which is useful. We could play a move like knight takes e5, which threatens knight to f3. And if you take, then d4. can't be taken because of the pin, and this can't be taken because of the pin, and the knight can't move because of the pin, which is a pretty cool idea. But again, it seems like overkill. It seems like overkill. As in, overcomplicated. I think I like the look of the move knight e3. Just pressuring more things in the white position. Yeah, I think that's good. Because realistically, if we end up the exchange here, because of the importance of the c-file, we should win this, especially if we eliminate this bishop, because then we can go rook c4 and apply pressure to d4. We can double up, we can play b4 and like force the position open. And the d pawn will be a massive weakness, which is like part of the whole point of the opening. By, you know, going c5 on move 3, it's the entire point of the opening is to weaken the d pawn, and it remains weak now. So okay. I suppose we can just trade everything. Or is... No, wait. Is there something even better? If queen takes, I think we actually have knight to c2 check. Which I didn't see before, but actually that's completely game over. That's even stronger. Because, well, if my opponent moves his king, then we just go bishop to g3 and force a queen trade and we're up a piece. If we take, of course, we can just take, and go like rook to c4, rook d1, rook c8, and it's winning. But knight to c2 check should be even more winning. If you take, then I take. It's defended via x-ray. And if you move your king, then I'll take the queen, then I'll take the rook, and I'm up way too much material, and my opponent resigns. A very clean game. I would be pretty shocked if we've actually made any mistakes that game, and hopefully it shows you the power of the Caro Kann and of the c5 system. So, okay, yeah, we go into... Well, the game actually starts as a queen pawn opening, but I like to play c6 because it's kind of an anti-London. Because if bishop f4, which a lot of people play, then queen b6, this is actually really difficult to defend with the white pieces. Because the best move is knight to f3, which not many people play, giving up the b2 pawn. And it's quite difficult, although knight f6 is actually the best move here. A lot of people will also blunder and just go queen c1 and hang the d pawn, which is pretty hilarious. But, you know, worst case scenario, you know, if like knight to f3, knight to f6, something like this, you can get kind of like a modern, or you can play d5 and turn it into a Slav. It's completely up to you. But it also gives my opponent the opportunity to transpose into a Caro Kann, which I'm very happy with. So d5, e5, and c5. This pawn can be taken, but it's also very difficult to play. c3, knight c6, and my opponent goes f4, which is a dubious move. f4 makes more sense in this position. No, sorry, not this position. It's better to take, and after knight to c6, then play f4. Because we don't have the option of taking on d4 here, because you've already taken us. And this is actually a very interesting line, where, again, knight to h6 is also incorporated. Although I like to start with e6 here. You get some very forcing lines like this, which are very, very... Sorry. This, knight to f3, knight to h6, and it's very interesting. But, okay. My opponent instead goes for this line. We take, c takes, and knight to h6, which is the best move. And we give my opponent the chance to go knight to f3, which is actually really bad. Really bad. If knight to c3 and we insist on bishop g4, then my opponent can go bishop to e2. Okay, that's a funny move. If here, then here, and like this. But realistically, we could just take as well. Taking is also fine. But knight to f3 and bishop g4, and it becomes very, very difficult to defend the center. Knight c3 just blunders the game, really. You kind of have to go bishop b5 and counterpin. But yeah, knight c3. We go e6, Knight to f5 was slightly better, apparently, but e6 is also completely viable. Again, you really do have to do something about this knight, but my opponent doesn't. He blitzes out the move a3. And yeah, bishop takes. It was actually better to take with the queen, give up the d4 pawn, go back to d1, bishop c5, if like b4, bishop b6. If bishop e3, I think we have knight c2. And this bishop is an absolute monster. In these lines where f4 gets played, in the advanced Caro Kann with c5, the dark squared bishop for black is a very powerful piece in many, many lines. But yeah, he takes back with the g-pawn, allows the queen to come in. We go knight to f5. There is very little you can do about the threat. The best move for white is king d3. Allowing this, and just... the king is just on d3, which is hilarious. But he goes bishop e3. This wasn't even the best move. Bishop c5? dc5, knight e3, king e3, d4, king e2, dc3, bc3, and queen f4. And you can see why this is the best move, because e5 is going to fall, the d-file's open, we're going to castle, game over. But that's very intricate. I choose knight to g3, which isn't the best line, but it's completely winning. Queen a4, I just develop the bishop. No need to panic. Knight comes in, just castle. No need to panic. Rook c1, I go a6, kicking the knight away. I thought if the knight came into d6, then we just chop it off and go rook d8. And I was like, well, you can't defend this. And yeah, you really can't. There's literally no way to defend it. So knight go back to c3. We give a check. Bishop to f2. And then we go b5. A move I was really happy with. Now, b5 immediately I rejected on the basis of potential complications. Now, I knew this must be winning, but I didn't want to risk anything. Because here, if queen h2, my opponent doesn't have to go bishop to f2 and allow this. He can just move the king. And don't get me wrong, I'm completely winning. But, you know, the knight maybe gets a bit uncomfortable and a little bit stranded. I suppose I can come into c4, to be fair. But you get what I mean, right? I think I was actually more concerned about b3. Not in this particular line, but like in general. So instead, I deliver the check first and then go b5. Because now, this just doesn't work. Because now the queen has to retreat. Because if you take, I have this. And the game is over. So, queen goes back to d1. We go knight to a5. My opponent goes f5, which is a good idea to create counterplay. Like taking, you'll see the evaluation drops massively. And white actually has chances here, despite his king being in the center and being down an exchange. But we just go knight c4. If white takes, we'll just take. And if anything, this helps us. If white pushes, then, well, we just win a pawn. Cool. That's absolutely fine by me. So the queen goes to c2 to defend b2. We go rook to c8. g4 just allows bishop g5. And this is horrendous for black. Because after the rook moves, we go bishop to h4. And there is way too much pressure on this bishop. The king goes back to e1. And yeah, we have knight to e3. And there's very little white can do. Very, very little white can do. Because after the queen moves, as we saw, we just take. And then we go knight c2. And the game is over. Now, one of the things that... one of the reasons I first played bishop g5 is because if we go for the immediate bishop to h4, I was slightly concerned about knight to d1. Concerned is the wrong word. I was like, okay, maybe this defends. Because here I don't have knight to e3 as much. Because I was like, well, you can do this. And obviously I'm not going to take and blunder mate. I'll do something like this. But like, why allow the complications? With bishop g5 forcing the rook away first... Then, if knight to d1, we can just move this knight. And if you take, then I can just take back. And it's dead easy then, right? And white really can't do anything. Really can't do anything. If you move the queen, then I'll just go like rook c2. And this is a hilarious looking position. So we force the rook away. King goes back. Bring the knight in. And obviously, this is a nice little tactic. We are up way too much material. And my opponent resigns. The Caro Kann's sick. I'm telling you, it's sick. I also don't know why the names have gone off the board, but like, you know what it looked like. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you want to see another really interesting Caro Kann game, check out the video up here. And if you want to see the previous episodes of the speedrun, check out the playlist down here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in one of those videos.